So last week, we wrapped up with a strange yet interesting conclusion. And this was it. And I'll tell you something. I study a lot of things, and a lot of things just come to me. And but sometimes they startle me, and this one did. When I read and saw scientific proof that color does not exist, you know? No, this shirt is not red. Her shirt is not blue. This is not white. That is not. There are no colors outside of you. And I said, oh, who is this nut? I mean, this is ridiculous. But I found that the colors are made in here. In electronic impulses between here and this little room in the back, the colors are painted in. So what you see, you think you see color. But it's all done by electric impulses. And we're going to. See, what happens is our eyes are impacted by the photons. And the photons enter through the cornea of the eye. And then they transmit to this little room in the back of the brain. And there, all of this is deciphered. And on the basis of the spin and momentum of the photon, the brain, it translates it into color and into form. But it's all actually electrical impulses. You're not seeing anything. Well, the more I thought about this, the more I realized, you know what? We haven't a clue about anything. I mean, nobody ever told me there was no color. Nobody. Nobody. So we know absolutely nothing about who and what we are. And we've been totally confused and led over a cliff by religious people who know less than we do. And we don't know anything. This is the deal. We are photons made in the image and likeness of the supreme photon that we call God. Okay? Photons are energy packets of light. That's what we are. Now here's something we do not use eyes to see. We do not use ears to hear. All of this is done by electrical impulses. It's all little packets of electrical impulses that are deciphered through the electrical mechanism of the computer on the top of your shoulders and give you a perception that something is out there. There may be nothing out anywhere. Because you have to remember that you are a photon, and what you perceive as being seen are actually packets of electrical codes being deciphered in the back room of your brain. There's no sense of smell. There's no sense of touch. All these senses are transmitted through wiring in the brain and then deciphered from coded electrical language, which makes the photon that we are think it is a physical being when it is not. Now, all of this is, I had some guy, but I had some person wrote me and say, yeah, you must be smoking something. You must be shooting up because you're off the wall. You're absolutely crazy with you. And I wrote back to him, I said, from a Christian who believes that a snake told a lady to eat an apple, how can you even suggest that I'm off the wall? But they do. That's their thinking. See, it's when you tell them what really exists, they think you're off the wall because nobody ever told them that before. Nobody ever said anything about stuff like this. I mean, how old are you? Nobody ever told you this stuff. All of these years, you've gone to school, you've gone to college, and you come here, you sit here, and you got some guy in a red shirt telling you there is no color, this shirt isn't really red. Nobody ever said that. So we lose all touch with our true identity. We lose all touch with our existence by thinking that we are physical beings when we are not. You are not a physical being. You are operating a physical, material piece of equipment made of meat and bone and electrical signals that it can carry, and you are operating that as a photon, an invisible intelligence of consciousness. It's all a great illusion of packets of electrical signals. I'll tell you something. This is not difficult for me to explain because I'm not capable of explaining it. I have to give you the scientist. But it is difficult for you to hear, and it's difficult for me to hear. Because nobody can tell me there's no color out there. I can see it. There's color here. What they are talking about. But it's not. I think I'm looking at that. I'm not. The eyes are picking up the photon spin and momentum and sending electrical packets back here, which then get deciphered to give an illusion that I'm seeing that. That's the way it works. Did you ever go to a 3D movie? You know, where things like, it looks like things are flying right out of the screen. When you go down to Disneyland, you go into 3D, people are ducking and everything. But there's nothing flying. It's an illusion. It's an illusion. Last week, I read a description of seeing that said that the brain unscrambles all of the electronic signals so that we get the illusion that we are seeing something. How do I explain this? You're not seeing. You get an illusion that you are, but it's actually photons traveling down the circuits and then being deciphered into 2 points in the back of your brain, which are then injected into you, the invisible photon who has no eyes, ears, nose, or anything else. So that's what happens. It processes signals that something can use them, and that something is photon. Because what's the purpose of this? What's the purpose of photons entering through these cameras and then being deciphered going down this electrical pathway to the back of this brain? The purpose of it is so that it can be given to the photon who is operating this body and create an illusion of existence in a material realm. Now, the Bible confirms that God is a photon, that Jesus is a photon, and that we realize that being made in the image and likeness of God, we too are photon. So that word, photon, we apply to a strange element in the subatomic realm. That means all of this out here, that you think there's nothing there. There is everything there. You can't see it, you can't sense it, but it's there, okay? So, an intelligent entity alien to the 3 dimensions known as photon is what you are and what I am. Let me repeat that. You are an intelligent alien, okay? But you are alien also to the 3-dimensional world. So you come as photon. You connect to physical body, and then you get plugged in to these electronic deciphering elements in the brain, and you think you're seeing and doing, and you're not. You know something? You know what's an amazing thing? Because we are actually back in this little room here as the invisible photon, watching this on a big screen somehow. There may be nothing out here at all. Get that? So, you and I are alien visitors to this planet in the 3-dimensional realm and allowed use of a body for a temporary period of time in the same way that you rent a car. You go to Enterprise, yeah, you're going to have it, and you got to have it back by so-and-so. Well, this body's going to have to be back by so-and-so. It'll shut down, and then you turn it in and you get another one. But as photons, which we are cast in the middle of a struggle of our true heritage of light, which is our true nationality, and this new and very heavy heritage of darkness. In other words, once we connect to this body, we connect to everything that it holds dear to it. Its pride, its nationality, its need to achieve and compete and victory and fight and all of this stuff. And so there's a struggle that goes on to get us, the photon, to totally immerse ourselves into that lower physical realm, which is so attractive because, even though it's bad there, it's also got pizza and chocolate milk and sex and all this stuff. And so we're pulled down there, and yet the tugging is also at the right side to stay with our true heritage of light. Now, what makes it so hard is because we have all had beings that we loved and were part of our families, and they've gone on. They've died. And we've never been able to communicate with them. And what makes it so hard to communicate with those you should be communicating with is because of a total misunderstanding of what we are. And we've all had mothers or fathers. Wouldn't you love to be able to communicate? Well, you can if you understand what you are and how it's done. We're looking, this is the problem. Think of somebody in your family, think of somebody, your friends, think of somebody that has died that you would like to communicate with, and then think of, you're looking for a physical body now, aren't you? You remember Uncle Jim, you remember Grandpa Ted, you remember all, but you remember them in physical form. Instead of understanding that they are exactly as we, except we currently have temporary body custody. Sorry? Their consciousness, they're intelligent, they have memory and all of these things. But until we can put down this idea of them as the people we knew in the physical state, then we're going to have a problem with it. Let me just show you what I'm talking about. There we are. Now we're going to go to the slide, Steve. All right, now you see, the reality of this is that we've got a human body, a physical body. But that's not who that person is. That person is acting out in the physical realm, but that person is actually photon, which you can see at the top. And the one who died is photon. So you see, why wouldn't it be possible for the person in the red robe here, who is photon, as you can see at top, to communicate with the departed, the one who died physically, and his photon over there on the right? Why wouldn't it be possible? The photon with the body, totally consumed to communicate, is we have a total lack of understanding of how this works. And we have a total lack of understanding of what we're to respect. Remember, we were created as photon and will always be a photon. You're not from the Middle East. You're not from Germany or Japan or England or the United States. Oh, that's bull. You are photon. You're from the universe. From 4555. Photon is your nationality and your heritage. So to return to photon is to return to your heritage. And that is the most difficult thing to do because we are all consumed, like that guy, in the physical body. Our nationality. Oh, we can't have those people here. What are you talking about? Who owns this? Now, over and over, I have shared with you the basis for understanding ourselves as photons, which is what? Intelligence, consciousness, and thinking of our bodies as cars. There is no difference, absolutely no difference between you getting into your car and driving it or you getting into your body and driving it. No difference whatsoever. The intelligence is not in the car. The intelligence is not in the body. The intelligence is the driver in the car. The intelligence is the photon of the body that makes the decisions. So you have two natures, and I hope that you'll stay with me, and I hope that you'll stay awake, and I hope that you'll listen, because this is probably one of the most critical things you'll ever hear in your life when you leave this thing. Really, it is. And nobody has ever told it before. So I want you to hear it. You have a nature in the physical three-dimensional world. You know, you go on vacation, you go to work, you eat pizza and chocolate and all of these things that we love so much. But you also have a natural nature in the non-dimensional subatomic realm. You are two, okay? They call it soul and spirit. Forget those words. They're religious words. They don't exist. We got to get away from all religious words and get to the reality of what this really is, or we're not going to know how to operate it, okay? If you're going to call that light bulb over there Jesus, well, then you're going to pray to it, please. On the other hand, if you're going to know how it works as a light bulb and a photon and so forth, when you throw the switch, you can utilize it. It's the same thing with this. The reason you're cut off from those people who have died is because you don't know what the heck to do. You don't know what you are. You don't know how this works. So how can you possibly communicate with them? In a three-dimensional world, you operate by the senses: sight, taste, touch, smell, and hearing. That's the way the physical realm works. In the non-three-dimensional world, you operate via electrical impulses which communicate to you in the same way that you talk to yourself, or the same way that you think, except there are no English words. There are no nationalities. There is nothing like that, okay? There is nothing in the photon world that is discussed verbally through language. It is done through perception, which I'll show you. So everyone in existence is photon. They operate bodies. But the separation into countries and nationalities and religions is all made by the lower realm. It does not exist in your true realm. The photon that was here, that we didn't like that person, is now there in a totally different realm. No nationalities, no countries, no borders, nothing like that. We created all of those things. All photons look to be able to operate bodies. That's why you're sitting in the body that you've got now. Because it's more gratifying. It's much more gratifying to be a photon in a body and to be able to have sex and go for a ride and go swimming and go on vacation and eat and all of this stuff. That's fun. That's what it's for. That's why we do it. See? All things beautiful which require a physical body to experience is what we photons want. And so that's why we gravitate to these bodies. And this is the most basic lesson that has never been taken by people. And for that reason, we have been totally misled on the nature of life and our enjoyment of life, or our lack of it in living. We have been totally misled. We are listening. The same people that had us bomb the hell out of Vietnam, for people that did nothing to it, the same people that had us bomb the hell out of Iraq, are the same people that we listen to and we elect them. And we pay them money. And then we go in and listen to the same people in churches telling us the same thing about the spirits and the souls which don't exist, because they know nothing about the subatomic realm. Nothing. Even though their very Bible tells them. So what I want you to do, can we, for a few minutes here, sit back and take in the reality of what we are and where we have come from and how we find ourselves immersed in all of this. Now this is a question I've got to ask you. It's a tough one. Are you willing to throw everything you've ever learned about yourself and what life's meaning is in the garbage can and start from scratch to realize yourself and how everything works for the very first time? It doesn't make any difference how old you are, how young you are. Are you willing to do that? Are you willing to thumb your nose at all of this religious stuff that has been nothing but destruction and pain and hurt and stress for people, and start to learn, hey, everything works naturally according to nature. Everything works that way. There's nobody that can circumvent nature. You flow in harmony with it. If you're willing to throw away all of that stuff that has misled you to the point where now, after all of these years, you still don't know what the heck's going on. If you're willing to throw all of that stuff away. Well, you know, most people are going to say, are you crazy? I've never heard that stuff before. I mean, I'm talking about conversing with people and telling them something that is so bizarre that they have to pay attention, but the reaction's going to have to be, I never heard that. That's crazy. So what I have to share with you has to be something that is true, but something no one has ever told you before. Something that is a shocker. And I shared one with you last week from Dr. Peter Goras. And Steve and Joan. Okay. And now, Steve, just stay where you are. Don't move, okay? Yeah, you're fine. Peter Goras was born in Brooklyn, New York. He received a PhD. He received an MD degree from Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine and proceeded directly into a career in eye research at the National Institutes of Health as part of the Public Health Service, at first in the Neurological Institute and the Division of Blindness, and later in the National Eye Institute. Dr. Goras is renowned in 3 areas of vision research, all of which he has been a pioneer and leader of. Getting back to me. Let me ask you a question. Do you feel that this man has credentials to talk about vision and the eyes? And the answer is you have to be saying yes, yes. So he is a scientist that I have to place on my list because he has excellent credibility. Yet what he says is unbelievable. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. The first thing you'll see on the next slide, is the pictures in color, which is the normal way we envision things. Next to it is black and white, which is the way they really are. And this is what he says. Color vision is an illusion created by the interactions of billions of neurons in our brain. There is no color in the external world. It is created by neural programs and projected on to the outer world we see. Want to come back here? You didn't hear that from somebody in a rock shop or a smoke shop or a New Age. This is one of the top vision guys and he's saying there is no color in the external world. It's created by things inside of you. All of this is inside of here. Nothing is out there. And if color is an illusion, why doesn't anybody ever told you that before? You know why? Because they didn't know. They knew all about God and they knew all about Jesus, but they didn't know the basics of what creation was. Let's go to the next slide. And the next slide, okay, Dr. Goras says color should be explained at the level of single cells in our brain. Although still beyond reach, progress is being made in deciphering these clever circuits that create our perception of an external world. Whoa. You can go back to me. You know what he just said? He said that these electrical packets in our head create a perception. In other words, I perceive that this is what. Did you ever see something or look in the mirror and then somebody takes a picture of you and you say, that doesn't look like me. I don't look like that. It's a perception. Because remember, the camera's picking up the photons the same way you pick up the photons, but the perception may be different. So there is something that is electrical circuitry, Dr. Gora said, that is in our head that creates a perception of the external world. See what it is? You are not seeing anything. You're in this back room, and it's being fed like on a screen to you, the photon, so you perceive that that's what's out here. Everything out here, but is there such a thing as that? Is there anything out here at all? And then we find out from this guy that everything is either gray or nothing. And if there is anything out there, is it all a perception based on illusions created in our photon consciousness by electrical circuitry? Are you with me? Can you figure out what I'm talking about? That this is going on in the back here, where all of this is deciphered and then shot into the photon, which is you, and the photon is getting all of these types of impulses. You're not seeing anything. You're not feeling anything. You're getting impulses, which is creating an illusion in packet form that we're seeing these things. Something in our brain, body, electrical circuitry produces packets of electrical information that provides a perception to our photon consciousness concerning what existence is in the three-dimensional realm. It gives us a perception of what is supposed to be. This is what the doctor said. It creates our perception of the external world. Doesn't tell you what it really is, but it's how you perceive it. Now let's define that word perception. We'll go to the next slide. And you might have to hit that. The definition of perception. Perception is the process by which organisms interpret and organize sensation to produce a meaningful experience in the world. Come back to me for a minute. Listen to that. Organisms interpret electrically in order to produce a meaningful experience in the world. They make us think in some way that's what's out there. Let's go back to the slide. Sensation usually refers to the immediate relatively unprocessed result of stimulation of sensory receptors in the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, or skin. Thus, perception in humans describes the process whereby sensory stimulation is translated into organized experience. In other words, I feel this? I didn't. I didn't feel anything. There's sensory things that are sending signals up all the way back into here. They go back into the control room. Oh, I think I felt something, but I didn't. That experience or percept is the joint product of the stimulation and of the process itself. In other words, you think, I touched this, but you really didn't. It's the joint product of the stimulation of the sensors and the process of the sensors going back to the back room and deciphering it for the photon. So it's all illusion. So perception, or what we think is going on out here, is the product of electrical stimulation of the senses. Stimulation of receptors in the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin sending signals to our photon self as to what we're to perceive. Huh? You're not even, you're back in, you're plugged in and you're watching TV is what's going on. Just like you're home. You're not really there. You're seeing things, but it's not there, and it's the same thing. See, we think we're here in the eyes, and we're not, but we're not. It's just photons racing back and creating that. So we're not experiencing the outer reality at all. We're receiving electrical impulses which translate to us how the outer reality should be perceived. But this raises another question. Is there really an outer reality out here? If something is hitting our photon selves with electrical packets that create a perception of what reality is, then the reality we think is there is really nothing more than the electrical packets that are bombarding us. Let's look at the next slide. Okay? All right? Historically, systematic thoughts about perceiving was the province of philosophy. Philosophical interest in perception stems largely from questions about the source and validity of what is called human knowledge, epistemology. Epistemologists ask whether a real physical world exists. Because all we ever get as photons is a TV show back there. We don't know what really does exist. Does it exist independently of human experience? And if so, how its properties can be... You ever hear the old thing, if a tree drops in a forest or something? Well, wait a minute. If there's nobody there to see it, does the forest exist at all? Oh, yes, I know, because I've seen it. But what if nobody's seen it? Is it there? How could it be? Because it's all electric packets that go back to the sensors, and if there's nobody there to see it, how could it be there at all? So the question is obvious. Since we are photons who perceive the existence of a world, not on actual contact, but on the basis of electrical signals that are injected into us as photons, does a real physical world exist, or are we simply players in some kind of matrix video game? And you know what? You are. Let's go to the next slide. Such fundamental philosophical assertions as the existence of a physical world are taken for granted among most scientific students of perceiving. People even study perceiving. Typically, researchers in perception simply accept the apparent physical world as it is described in those branches of physics concerned with electromagnetic energy and optics and mechanics. The problems they consider relate to the process whereby percepts are formed from the interaction of physical energy, light, with the perceiving organism. Or further interest is the degree of correspondence between percepts, as perception, and the physical objects to which they relate. How accurately, now listen to this last one, and I know it gets a little bit confusing, but don't let that get you. How accurately does the visually perceived size of an object match its physical size as measured? In other words, what you perceive to be is not necessarily what it is. Have you ever went to pick something up that you thought was heavy? And it wasn't. Your perception did not match the actual electrical impulses of the weight of the thing. So science asks, okay, a physical world probably does exist. But their concern, and that's what this is saying, is the interaction between the physical energy that is called outer reality with the perceiving organism, which is sending all of these electrical impulses through our skull to tell us what we should be perceiving. And now I get another question. Who the heck is us? Who is we? So they raise the questions. If you look at a perceived object, electrical impulses say the object is an apple. That's the way it's coming back here and decoded back in your little control room. How big, what color, and what shape does the real apple have? If there is such a thing, compared with the perceived version that we get through electrical impulses, they're not necessarily the same. So we're not actually taking part in the real outer world. We think we are based on electrical impulses that are ejected into us as photons. Now, you've heard of people who've lost their sense of smell or their sense of touch. If they lose the sense of touch, they have to be careful, obviously. People who lose their sense of sight, when those senses turn off because of failure of electrical circuitry, then those things cease to exist. The electrical circuits shut down, there is no more. Okay? Where is all of this? There is no more. There are no electrical impulses that can get through to plug into the photon and say, that's an apple or that's a room or whatever. There is no visible world. There are no such things as odors. There are no such things as physical objects to touch. All of this is the result of photons and electrons and senses which pick up all of this stuff and translate it back into the computer, into the matrix, making us think that we're in the middle of something when we're actually in the middle of some kind of a TV production of electrical magnitude. So these things no longer exist when the senses shut down. So what we call reality is not reality, but rather electrical impulses inserted into our photon cells to create a perception of reality. Which begs the next question. Is it possible for there to be reality at all? Since the only way we can experience it is through electrical impulses that create the illusion for us, making us think that we are involved. I know what you're thinking. I can feel it. I can see it. It's there. No, you can't fit. No, you can't see. And you're not looking at anything. You're way back in the room, and those electrical impulses are deciphering what you should perceive to be. You can't see anything back there because you don't have any eyes. Photons don't have eyes. So as soon as some of these signals shut down, we can only experience the part of reality that was not shut down in the circuitry, right? If the vision circuit goes bad, then visible reality no longer exists. And that leads to another question. Whether our photon self, and I think you understand what that is now, can be injected with perception packets that some higher being... Let's start again, because it's important. Can our photon self, you know who that is, be injected with perception packets that some higher being wants us to perceive as reality? Or can reality be constructed in such a way that things that are physically there cannot be picked up by our sensors and thus do not allow us to know their existence? Let me ask you a question. You could have sitting right next to you a being. But that being's energy could be such that your electrical circuitry cannot see it. I never heard of that. You didn't? You're on channel 2? You know what's going on channel 7? If you can't get to channel 7, you're not going to be able to see it, but it's there. Who's sitting next to you? See? Because it's all just packets of information. But you say, I take a picture with my camera, so I know what reality is. But the camera is doing the same thing the eye does. It picks up photon particles and translates them into a perceived image, which is then recorded. Now, what is interesting is there's many times when you see a picture of yourself, as I said before, you say it doesn't look like you. Of course it doesn't, because it's just a perception. It's your first perception of what you think this looks like. The real you is in reality outside the realm of photon particles. It doesn't exist anyhow. It's all an illusion. It's all electrical impulses. Let me just briefly take you through this perception thing, and notice from the website the reference to you and us and so forth. In other words, you'll see the description of the human machine processing operation getting information to you or to we. And this comes from the Charles Sturt University online. Can we go to that? Okay. The group of information processing theorists, which came out of cognitive psychology research, used the computer as a model for the way humans think. See? This branch of cognitive psychology looks at the way people take in, process, and act on information, focusing on attention, perception, and memory. Now, I'm going to ask you something. Do you read that? What does it say? The way people take in. Who is the people? I mean, this is looks at the way people take in the process. The people, it's the photon. That's what it has to be. So that's how we will approach it. Comparing the human brain to a computer, and which I would interject for you to keep on top of, is that both the material computer and the human computer rely on what? An operator. And that operator in the human computer is photon. Let's go to the next slide. Like a computer, the human mind takes information, organizes it. Now, do you see what you're seeing here? This is this thing on top of your head. This is what goes on. The information that comes in is organized, and it stores it for later use, then retrieves it when necessary. In the computer, information data is entered into the computer through a keyboard or scanner. The human corollary would be the ears, the eyes, or another sensory organization. The same thing, okay? So you got a keyboard, you got a scanner, and then for your computer, you got eyes and ears. It's the same thing. In the computer, the data needs to be processed. That means comparisons and logical decisions are made. The brains of the computer is the central processing unit, CPU, where the data is processed. So basically, there is the comparison between the computer that sits on your desk and the computer that sits on your shoulders. Now, let's go to the next slide. The human match for this task is called working memory, where we think about and process the entered data. To store its information in the computer uses hard disks and floppy disks. You know what they are. Humans store information in long-term memory. Having processed the information, computers need to do something with that information. And this may be visual display on the screen or hard copy. The human equivalent is talking, walking, smiling, or shaking hands. In other words, if you're going to come back to me, the computer does what it does, putting out information. You do what you do after you get the information, and the computer says, okay, you can shake hands with that. You do what you're told via the electronic path. So we see that the activity that appears to be going on in the physical realm is actually the result of electrical information into hard disk on the computer and long-term memory on the shoulder computer. Now, the long-term memory idea needs further discussion, because where is that? Obviously, the packets of information that are coming through the circuits cannot be placed in meat, which is inside of your skull, which is the makeup of the physical body. So the actual place where this information is stored would seem to be reasonably described in the realm of the subatomic rather than the physical brain. Now, I'm going to show you a diagram of your head, and you'll see how external information is programmed. Can we go to the next slide? Okay, and so you can see overall, this is the information coming in. In the center, we have your central processing unit. That's right here. There are two little places right here on the sides of your neck, right in the back here. That's where all of this goes before it goes into photon, which is you. And then you see, after the stuff, as it's being processed, you have two things. It's either being stored, or as many of us as we get older, it's forgotten. But that's the way it works. It works just like a computer. Now, that diagram is obviously simplistic, but nevertheless, you get the idea. So we sum up this operation. We come to the part which is also found in the other description of the human brain mind that begs the fundamental question. Okay? Let us go to the next slide, please. And I got these words highlighted in yellow that were important to me, and I want you to pay attention. When people pay attention to information, people, picked up by the sensory registers, it goes into the working memory. If they don't pay attention, it's lost. Who the heck are people and they? Okay? In other words, all this is going on. Who's the person that's supposed to pay attention? Once in a working memory, it needs to be processed within 5 to 20 seconds for it to be transferred to the long-term memory. New information will only be transferred to long-term memory when it is linked in some way to prior knowledge. Let's skip down a sentence. Learning is the result of individuals successfully encoding new information or recording existing information in a new way. They can then recall that information from memory. Who are the individuals? Who are they? Who are people? And so forth and so on. It's photon. See? And then nobody ever comes to grips with that. Who are you talking about, they? So this is how it works. And now we see that. Is it the meat and bone that make up your body, or is it you? The intelligence, the consciousness, the photon that is caught up in this game called three-dimensional existence. And that is who you are. A photon receiving packets of information from electrical sensors in the body that gives you a photon with no eyes, no ears, no other stuff, a perception of being a person with a body in a wild, wild world. So the conclusion has to be that there are three parts to a human being. One is the physical part that carries out life in the material realm. Here we are, we're dancing and so forth. The second is the electrical part that delivers the codes for both the body to move and for the photon to decide. And the third is the photon which makes the decision. Okay? Am I going to drop this? Now, is the sensors that went up here going to decide? Is my hand going to decide? Is the meat going to decide? Is the bone going to decide? No, photon in the back is going to decide. And I decided. Do you see? And that's what it is. The fact that we as photons occupy physical bodies for periods of time does not create problems for our understanding of who and what we are. Let's look again at ourselves in the physical state that we experience here and also in our natural photon state. Okay? Here's our physical state on the left. Cute. Okay? We have a photon with a body, which is us. And we have a photon over on the right, which doesn't have a body. Those who have physically died. Their body died, but this is the part you got to get through your skull. Their photon is as much alive and in existence as your photon. It's just that they without a body, you with a body. The body died, but they are there. We don't know if they've moved on to another body, but that's not our concern. Our concern is communicating photon to photon. You can't communicate physical body to photon. It doesn't work that way, and I'll get to that. In other words, you cannot communicate with them body to photon because they have no body. They have no ears. They have no eyes. You can't communicate with them body to body because they don't have a body. Because physical bodies don't work that way. You know, if you're going to communicate body to body and you want to talk to somebody down the street or across the country, you got to use a cell phone. But in photon, you don't need a cell phone. You communicate with them photon to photon, just as Jesus put it. Let's go to the slide, please. Jesus Christ said, the true followers shall approach the Father in spirit and in truth, for the Father looks for such to come to him. God is a spirit, and they that approach him must do so in spirit and truth. Let's change the word now. Let's get rid of the religious word and say the true followers shall approach the Father in photon and in truth, for the Father look. God is a photon, and they that approach him must do so as photons and in truth. There's no other way. You can't do it physically. No other way. It doesn't make any difference whether it's God. It doesn't make any difference whether it's Jesus. It doesn't make any difference whether it's those who have passed away. It cannot be body to spirit. You cannot sit there thinking of Uncle Charlie or Aunt Marie or Mother Maybelle or whoever you're thinking of and thinking of them coming and sitting next to you as they were. It's over with. But they're still the same. They're still the same intelligence. They're still the same consciousness in the exact state that you're in as photon. It has to be photon to photon. That has not been taught that way, and that's why contact with those who have departed from us has never been made. Your real identity is a photon, not a human being. But you've been forced to abandon that reality, and now you follow people with robes and candles who have no idea that the only way to communicate with the higher light is electrically in the realm of photon. Or no, they say, you have to follow our ways. Father Feelgood or preacher, bro. But this is what the Bible says. You see, you're going to follow their ways. You're going to follow that religion's ways. What the Bible said here is the most important thing for people to get back into their heads. What we call God does not interact on the physical human plane. It is a totally different plane of photon, which is only available in meditation. Look what it says here in the next slide. It says, okay, Isaiah, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, because he's photon and your body. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. Why? Because he's photon and you're acting out and trying to act out in body and trying to communicate. We've never been allowed to understand this. Oh, Jesus loves the little children. God bless our troops. God, let me have a new iPod. Oh, Jesus. All this craziness which cannot possibly work because we are trying to communicate bodily, 3D, physical dimensions to the photon, which is impossible. And that's why Krishna and Buddha and Jesus admonished us in this way, as it's shown here in Hebrews 3:10. In the next slide. I was upset with that generation and said, they're always wrong in their heart. They have not known my ways, so I made up my mind they shall not enter into my rest. There's nobody going to make things happen for you. No hocus pocus. Why? They're always wrong. They don't know my ways, because my ways are photon ways, and they wouldn't listen to Jesus. They wouldn't listen to Krishna. They wouldn't listen to the Buddha who told them about the ways of the single eye. They're always wrong in their heart. They never get it right. And the reason for that is because religion has sought to control minds and wallets. They've not known my ways. According to our religion, my ways is reading books and singing songs and reciting prayers. Who's listening that doesn't have ears? The truth is we don't understand God's ways because God's ways are photon ways. And so you are left with your religious group all alone on planet Earth because you've no understanding of the realm of photon and meditation, and the door's locked, and you're standing outside on planet Earth with the stockbrokers, the preachers, and the politicians, and you wonder why you feel screwed up. As Sir William Crooks called them many years ago when he tried to discuss the reappearance from the dead of Katie King, the know-nothings. There's no reason why we should not be able to communicate with those who have died. It is a very natural and normal thing to do, but there are significant reasons why you haven't been able to do it, and our problem is communicating with those who have gone on. Why can't you be in touch with those people who have passed on? Let me show you in the next slide. Religion warns us not to try and contact the dead. The stupid fools, there is no such thing as a dead person. There are only dead bodies. They don't realize that those who have passed on the physical plane are photons very much as much alive as they are. There's nobody dead. We are told that we will see our loved ones again as people, but they are not people now. They are photons. They have consciousness and intelligence, but are photons. And once you are cut off from these electrical signals, you also are photons just like them. Because a car breaks down, does that mean the person driving it is dead? Because a body breaks down, does that mean the photon driving it is dead? Of course not. It's that simple. Religion tells us we should not contact the dead, and it places some spooky fear on the subject. Oh, we're going to contact the dead. Whoa. No. They try to convince us that when a body dies, the photon becomes a scary dweller in the land of the dead. Stupid. There is no such thing as the land of the dead because they're alive. You can't kill a photon. So you've got to reject that ignorant assumption and realize that a person with a body or without a body is the same person in the quantum realm. And the difference is only apparent in the physical realm, which is shut out from 90% of reality. The physical realm is kept in a bubble prison so you don't see. Oh, this is the biggest joke in the world. Real life, where those who have passed on exist outside of the prison. But did you realize you're in prison? You can only see 10% of the world. Just like if you're in a prison, you can only see 10% of the building. Do you know what a bubble universe is? This is what we exist in. Show them the bubble universe. There's the next slide. There's the bubble universe. That's where you live, in there. You can't see anything. The whole blasted good stuff is out here, and you're in that bubble saying, oh, I can see it all. Oh, look at all this. Oh, God is good. They know nothing. Stupid fools. That's an artist's rendering of the bubble universe. We are safe. And you know why we're kept in the bubble? Do you know why? Because they will not trust us with the good part of the universe because we're going to do to it what we do to the planet Earth. So they'll let people out when they've proved themselves worthy of it. Otherwise, stay in the damn bubble. What are you going to do? Get out there in a beautiful universe and blow the hell out of it like you do everything on the Earth? So there's a good reason we're only allowed to experience 10%. The good stuff's off limits until we learn how to behave and get out from under the direction of preachers and politicians who know nothing. But we have continued to follow the know-nothings in their attempts to keep us from those we've loved in the physical realm. You're not too long going to meet people in that photon realm who have died physically and have gone on. Betcha. So, but we get totally consumed by teachers and our religion, our tradition, our government, and so forth and so on. Yet those who we killed or had killed in the name of patriotism and Christianity and what other excuses, what are they? Watch this. Next slide. Everyone who has physically died is a photon. They have no eyes, they have no mouth, they have no nose, they have no legs. So you, who do, have to adapt a new way of communicating with them or forget about it. They have no names, they have no nationality, they have no religion, they have no sex, but they have consciousness, and we can communicate with them as we did here under a different set of codes. And you have to understand that. The idea of using a different set of codes for communicating with those who have passed is very, very important. Their appearance to you, when you see them, and you will be in the quantum realm without any connection to the physical bodily realm, though you will be alerted to their attempts to contact you. When something of this nature happens, I want you to direct your attention to it. Don't think it's just a coincidence, because what you're hearing here is opening your mind and is giving you information on how this works. So when this happens, you follow up on it. It's happened before to you, but you didn't know about this, so you just went on. Oh, I had that strange feeling. Oh, what the hell that was? Maybe it was the beans I had. I don't know what it was. Let me give you an example. I've been sharing with you about communicating with those who have passed on in the quantum and photon way, okay? Tuesday, Joan and I walked into this room for meditation. And there were a few people here. And one person, as a woman who I didn't recognize, I walked up, and as I approached her from the right side, it just came to me, boy, she looks like Joan's mother. And I walked around in front of her, not so much, but that was my first impression. But Joan's mother, Edna, she resembled her. So I came in front of her, shook her hand, and I asked her, yeah, what's your name? She says, Edna. Now this is the way that the quantum world, which is the real natural world, operates in communicating with our dense physical. From the front she didn't look 100% like Joan's mother, but that's not the point. She did to me as I approached from the side, and her name is Edna, and she was here at a time when we are beginning to understand our relationship to the true world that we are not part of, but had experiences with people. So we shared this together Tuesday, and we realized that something is happening. And I told Joan at dinner the other night, your mother in the quantum realm is reaching out, and you have got to, in the quantum realm, not in the physical realm, get your brain out of it. That's the first step in learning how to reunite. The subject of reuniting is brought up as I have raised it here, and suddenly you have an experience that you perceive to be some kind of a relationship with a loved one who has passed on. We began speaking about departed loved ones. We walk into a room. A woman is sitting here. I perceive she looks like Joan's mother, Edna, and her name is Edna. You have to immediately respond that Joan's mother was making contact. And you tell the religious nuts to get out of the way and stop obstructing reality with their stupid Dark Ages superstitions. Now we get to a very important point in determining this, how we reunite. What did I say a moment ago about Joan's mother and the incident Tuesday evening? I perceived that the woman looked like Joan's mother. That was my perception. It wasn't that she looked like a twin. It was the way I perceived it. The way she appeared to me back here. Okay? The electrical signals were telling me, looks like Edna, looks like Edna. In other words, that was the message that was coming through the electrical signals. The photon was saying, looks like Edna, looks like Edna. And the next thing, her name is Edna. The contact then is made. If I didn't perceive the appearances connecting to Joan's mother, then the name Edna wouldn't have meant anything, would it? I mean, she could have looked like, any of it, but it wouldn't have been a big deal. But when I first approached her, it looks like Edna. It's coming in here, and the packets are deciphering it, and then she says her name, so you know who we are talking about. Let me show you a picture of Joan's mother in the younger days. I'm going to surprise Joan. She didn't know she was one, but that's Joan's mother, Edna, in her younger days. When she's something that she knew she was on a screen. So where has this taken us? I know I've been long, but just give me a couple more minutes because this is going to get even gooder. We raised the subject of reuniting with loved ones and friends who have passed on. We had an experience Tuesday with perception of the resemblance to Joan's mother, Edna, by a woman who had come here and introduced herself as Edna. So now, in front of everybody, we publicly confirm in this dense three-dimensional plane a contact having been made by Joan's mother, Edna, from the universe of reality and life, which is outside of the confined bubble. And the whole thing began with my perception. So let us real quickly go back. Something in our brain body, electrical circuitry, produces this packet of information that gives us a perception of something. See? So I walk in, the photons are sending back signals, look like Joan's mother, Edna. Looks like Joan's mother, Edna. Hi, how are you? Good. Hi, what's your name? Edna. Okay. So, real quick to perception. Okay. Perception. Okay, perception in humans, go down and say, where sensory stimulation is translated into organized experience. The experience or percept is the joint product of the stimulation and the process itself. What's the stimulation? I walk in, I see somebody sitting there, looks like Edna. What's the process? The woman sitting there's name is Edna. The combined two, contact is made. Doggone it, don't tell me what. See, it's very easy to say, oh, no. But that's what you hear from religious people, and you got to run away from them. Because if you stay with them, you'll never meet the loved ones that you should be talking to. So what happens? The information arrives, translated into an experience, in this case, photon packets from Edna, and the process of the woman sitting there. And the two create a perception. But here's the difference. Edna, Joan's mother, is also aware of the fact that we on the dense three-dimensional plane have a very difficult time in responding. Because two things: we're either too scared because of religion, or we're prone to ridicule from our friends because of religion. So we don't follow up on it, even though contact was made. In other words, we've got to practice to overcome years of stupid brainwashing that we've endured from religion, which has separated from our beautiful love experiences of our family and those who have gone on. So what happened here? Let's evaluate it real quickly. John. Okay, number one, we approached the subject as normal and reasonable. We did. We examined how it works scientifically. I think we've done that tonight. We are now prepared to receive from quantum, if you're willing. We receive photon packets through the pineal gland of the brain, no problem. And the photon packets are deciphered in the brain to create the perception of contact. So, okay? Now, the first thing you got to realize is that the people who warn you not to contact, quote-unquote, the dead, that it's evil, are the very ones whose traditions come from the Dark Ages when science was not allowed. The very ones who used to slit people's throats and burn them at the stake. The very ones. They've taught you the most bizarre things under a threat that if you didn't believe them and if you didn't give them your money, you're going to go to hell, which they also made up. But once you study the quantum realm and realize that the electrophoton packets are received into the brain and deciphered to provide a perception of reality, then you can have absolute confidence in dealing with the subject. You know why? You're not dealing with any kind of spirit. You're not dealing with any kind of soul. You're not dealing with any kind of devils. You're dealing with creation, with nature. And in the same way that the leaves are on the trees, the same way that the photons are in you and contacting you, and the leaves fall and come back, and the people fall and come back. And it's just taking part in the natural phenomena that is life. So you got to make up your mind to be alert to any contact that you have, because you will have it. You will not be turned away from the experience of love because of superstitious religious people. You've got to be sure of that. These people have caused so much hurt and violence upon the earth. You don't need to be near them. Then you'll be ready. Then you'll be ready to receive. I'm not talking about some hocus pocus here. I'm not talking about some religion or spirituality. What we're discussing is natural, normal activity of nature. Now, real quickly, because I know we got to... As we understand all this, we should have a much better take on what occurred. Now, Sir William Crooks and Katie King, you remember that? Sir William Crooks, the most brilliant scientist who invented the X-rays and all of that stuff from back in the 19th century, brought a woman back to life in a seance. And William Crooks brought Katie King back from the dead and took a picture of her. And what was the statement before the English Parliament to the science and to the religious people who ridiculed him? What did he say about bringing Katie King back from the dead? What did William Crooks say? Well, let's take a look at what he said. He said, "I am attacked by two very opposite sects, the scientists and the know-nothings. Both laugh at me, calling me the frog's dancing master, yet I know I have discovered one of the greatest forces in nature." Now come on up with me. Grab onto the chair here, because we're coming at the end. He has discovered what? Did he discover a religious concept? No. A spiritual concept? No. One of the greatest forces in what? Nature. Something very, very natural is what he discovered. See? What he is saying is that seeing and speaking with someone who has returned after physically dying is natural. It's a scientific reality. One of the greatest forces in nature is the ability of the photon to create a perception which exists within your head, that you're seeing something outside of yourself. We've been all through that tonight. But wonder if it creates the perception inside of here that your loved one who has died is there with you. And you can talk, and you can speak, and you can see, and you can touch. even if they're not there and you're not there. Everything is reduced to packets of electrical information deciphered. In other words, it's not the meat and bone of your body. Seeing and hearing it is the packets of the photon deciphered, which then inputs into the photon that you are. Now let's go and take a picture, see a picture of Katie King, back from the dead, standing with William Crooks. Okay? There they are. The dead woman with the live man. But the interesting part is this. Stay with it. Don't change it. This is the interesting part. John? The live photon? The dead photon? Both alive. The dead body's photon is just alive, as much alive as the live man's photon. So we focus not on the bodies. We focus on the two photons. You're not looking at them physically. In fact, if you were, you couldn't see either of them because what is being transmitted to you is their photons. Oh, come on. This is too good. What I'm telling you is that when you're looking at William Crooks and you're looking at Katie King, you're getting all freaked out because you say she came back from the dead, but you're not looking at William Crooks and Katie King. You're receiving their photons. Both of them are exactly the same. See? So neither Katie King with her white dress or William Crooks with his snappy vest are there. What is there are two photons which pump information into our photon, giving the perception of seeing people. Do you ever hear that guy John Edwards that talks to people? Or do you understand now how it works? He's not some lunatic. He's receiving photon information which is deciphering itself, and a lot of times he gets screwed up himself saying, I'm hearing this, I'm not sure it is, because he's got all of this packet information impulses coming back and dumping there back into the photon, which is him. So of course it gets confusing. So then, what is the universal power that Sir William Crooks was talking about when he talked about people coming back from the dead? The power in the subatomic realm for photons to enter within the body's electrical circuitry and communicate back to our photon a perception of what we think we see based on the photon's properties. If the photon wants you to perceive Katie King, you will. She doesn't have to be there. Nobody has to be there. William Crooks doesn't have to be there. You're not even seeing that picture right now. It's back here in your control room. It's all an illusion of photon. So we say, oh, I see William Crooks. He's alive and has a body. But the problem with that assessment is you're not seeing William Crooks at all. You're seeing his photon. His photon has entered your electrical system, and the properties of his photon is deciphered and put into your photon. So there you got it, a perception of somebody with a snappy vest. So it makes no difference if he's alive or dead, because he's not there. Only his photon is there. And that's what translates the photon package into a picture of a man. So Katie King isn't there, just like William Crooks isn't there. But Katie King's photon, which did not die when her body died, is there. And the photon of Katie King enters the eye and deciphers into a picture of a woman in a white dress, which is then injected into your photon. So, hey, did he bring a dead body back to life? Of course not. What happened? The photon came into the room, entered into your eye, was translated and deciphered, and became Katie King in a white dress. All that you perceived that you saw. So we haven't seen either person alive or dead. We simply perceive the appearance based on the deciphering of photons. So let's take a look at the bodily alive Sir William Crooks and the bodily dead Katie King again and see what's really there. Steve? Here we go. Joan? Here's a picture now of William Crooks. There's William, and here's a picture of Katie, and that's what we're seeing. There they are. William Crooks alive, Katie King dead, and that's what you're seeing. And when it comes back, it gets translated here, and it comes out in your box back here, in your cinema, in the back of your head. Oh, a man with a snappy vest. And the other one comes back, a woman with a white dress. And William Crooks said to these stupid fools of religion and science, I had discovered one of the greatest forces in nature. Now do you understand? Now you understand what he saw. So neither of them are really there, but the photons are there. I'm not running off on some strange, kooky stuff here. I'm not making stuff up. I showed you the report from Gary Zukav from his book, The Dancing Woolly Masters. And I want to show you, we're wrapping this up, we're coming to the end of it, which I'm sure you're glad of. But I mean, this got me really off the roof. Because I know, now that we know, then now you're going to be able to reach out and hold that hand back in your control room in that photon quantum realm of somebody you love dearly and miss dearly. I want to show you a report from Dr. Carl Jung, who was an exemplary psychoanalyst of the early 1900s. This is what he said. Jung sees the photon as the entry point for consciousness into the universe. I'm in good company, aren't I? Jung's conclusion that the photon possesses choice is achieved through rational thought. I don't know what the hell he's saying, but if velocity is the derivative of position with respect to time, and acceleration is the derivative of velocity, what is the derivative of acceleration? I don't know, Carl, but I like the first paragraph. So we'll go on to the next one and see what he says here. The next one, I don't know. Science clearly accepts the first two derivatives. Yet, when it comes to acknowledging the logical third derivative, control inquiry ceases. See, nobody wants to go there. Wait a minute. What he's proving is, photon is conscious. Photon is the person. Because this would undeniably mean that the photon, a unique subatomic particle, is conscious. Thus, Arthur Young postulates a credible cosmology in which the quantum is consciousness, and it is solidly established upon rational deduction. So don't come around pointing your finger at me. I didn't say it, he did. And they are more educated than I am. So what's it mean? We wrap it up? It means that consciousness is photon. Photon is light that enters the body and brings messages that are deciphered to our photon. If you wish to meet with loved ones who have physically died, then you will do it via photon. They can't appear before you physically because nobody does. Even people that you see physically are not appearing before you physically because they're appearing back here at your big screen TV in the back of your head called deciphered photon. What appears before you is that photon which paints a picture for you to perceive something as someone. So your loved one, think of who you want to see, can appear right before you as photon, which you could not see. But if you stimulate the electron and attract the photon into you, then the photon will send electrical impulse packet information into your photon, and you will perceive contact. Notice I said stimulate the electron. That's necessary. You want to be filled with the view or perception of contact with a deceased loved one, then you got to do this. That loved one is photon or light as everything else that you perceive. The difference between the photon and the living bodily photon is you've got to summon the departed photon. In other words, I look at you, your photon radiates into me, goes back here, fine, I see it. But in order for somebody who's departed, who's died, you've got to summon that. Now, how do you bring that light into you? How do you summon it? What did Jesus say? Next, Matt, the light of the body is the eye. If your eye be single, your body will fill with light. If your eye be single, that means if you stimulate the pineal gland of the brain, which is a single eye, there are electrons in the pineal gland, and you want to do something with them so they attract your departed loved one. Your departed loved one is photon light, and if you stimulate the pineal gland, your body will fill with photon. It will fill with light. It will be deciphered in the back as your mother, your father, your grandfather, whoever it is that has died, and they're back with you in the control room, just as Jesus said. In other words, you want to attract it. It's scientifically possible. Is it possible? Let us conclude. And I said, but honestly, this is, by summing this up, with Hidden Meanings Conference Center at the Village Green Shopping Center, Route 9, Fork.